Well, we could start just whilst we're waiting for people to come online. We could potentially start with one of the online questions if you want.
I think that's a great idea.
Um,
I think
yeah,
that's a
and
great idea.
just just because obviously we're being recorded, so the person, if they're not here, they can come and listen to this later. So we had a question from Mary at the studio,
Okay.
and the question was: during pranayama breathing, should I aim to keep my thumbs connected to each other and to my chin? I feel like they often separate on the inhale. She's actually got two questions, but I'll deal with the first one first.
Okay. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question was, were you listening? Okay, no.
Yeah, sorry. Kind of, I thought there was more
Yeah.
she was going to say.
Yeah. So the two questions that are quite separate. The first one is, during pranayama breathing, should I aim to keep my thumbs connected to each other and to my chin? I feel like they often separate on the inhale.
I have a very quick answer, which is that you shouldn't aim to separate them. If they separate a bit naturally as you get to the top of the inhale, this is all right. But if you get to the point when you're deliberately and you're wrapping your hands around your throat, which you see sometimes is a problem. So it's not that you should have an aim about keeping them together. It's that you should have an aim about you shouldn't have an aim about what did I say before? Separating them. Yeah. Yes. Just let them be, but don't wrap them around your throat.
Yes. Rajashree, welcome.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Saturday, how are you? Good.
Very good.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Raj.
Is Jeff there?
Yes, and Juan joined us as well.
Yes.
And Juan is in the house.
Yeah, he's somewhere.
Somewhere in there.
He's lost.
So I now if Juan is here.
Oops.
And then someone else, 847. I think that's 847 Chicago, but I don't know if that's a Chicago number. Anyway, you want to say the question to Rajashree, Matt?
Yes, so we were going to start, Rajashree. You're muted right now, but we thought we'd start with an online question. So the online question was a very simple one, which was, during pranayama breathing, should I aim to keep my thumbs connected to each other and my chin? I feel like they often separate on the inhale.
Try to be as tight as possible.
Yeah.
That's the answer, basically. You just don't need to separate unless, I have seen some people has a problem with the carpal tunnel syndrome, and they're very difficult for them to grip tight, but it is good for them to try to put that effort to do that, because it's a wrist problem, fingernail, the joints problem in the fingers. So those people I have seen difficult for them to do. And a lot of time, if you have a upper back, not enough flexibility, that's also they try and they're trying hard enough to do, and sometimes it's split, like they go very far away. So we try to keep reminding them to 10 fingers interlace as tight as possible all the time underneath the chin. So.
It felt like part of
how they don't separate.
Yeah, we're all practicing here. It felt like part of her question too, Matt, was, the aim, if you will, if that's what the word is, right? Keeping the knuckles against the chin.
Yeah,
that is definite, right?
You definitely do that.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So she had another question as well there.
Yeah, so just to finish that part of Mary had a second half of her question, which was a different posture, toe stand. Can I bend my knee on the way to the ground in toe stand, or is it better to fall forward into my hands? Oh, so this is quite a common question.
Yeah, we've had this.
Does it matter?
Well, in the dialogue, I mean, it says, it has an additional note which is specific to beginners. There's no instruction to keep the legs straight, except for there's a comment about beginners, which is more about the hazard of them hurting themselves because they don't know what they're doing and they try to overbend the knee and make a total mess of everything.
It's just for we're talking about the toe stand main.
Yes.
Just a regular toe stand, or you're talking about tree pose toe stand, the last one, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I recently was doing a workshop, and their question was very interesting because a lot of people love to do this pose because they want to try, because they're for a long time, they are beginners. And they were sitting on the floor, lifting up, and they're trying to lift their body up from sitting from the floor. So it was I didn't know who started this, like how it's been started, but there was a little bit of extra effort was put to learn that way, and they were able to do it. So it was like interesting for me to see, because then they say, what do you think? I said, why you are not trying the way it's supposed to be? And like people get stuck doing something when they cannot do it, and they try to modify. So they never try to do the way it's supposed to be, right way, you can say. So that's one thing. First time I have seen the toe stand being done from the floor, sitting on the floor, have a left leg straight, they lift the right foot up like like a half a lotus. You are trying to get into the lotus, then they're coming up from there. Like they bend the knee forward on the left knee, then lift the right foot up, and then they're coming up. So it was a very creative.
Yeah.
I think in Britain we call that cheating.
Cheating, yes.
Cheating. And honestly, it feels harder that way. I think one of the reasons why this was such a conversation and brought up is because I don't know if it happens so much today, but people overly eager to try and do it and maybe not so body aware, then all of a sudden, right, all of the pressure's on their knee, right, if they're bending it, right? And then all the
and all kinds of things.
Yeah, right. So, coming down, hands on the floor, it keeps the weight more in the hands to safely bend the knee forward without pressure on the knee joint, right?
So as I understand it, it's a note in the dialogue that Bikram has for absolute beginners. That they should go down with, keep the legs straight. It doesn't, by the way, say locked. One of my teachers in the beginning would say you had to lock your knee to come down, which then you see people teetering around on their foot with their hip, it's very unpleasant. So, but after that, you can bend the knee as you come down a little bit, or you can come down as you get better. You can come all the way down on bent knee, if you can do it.
Yeah, and I bet you a lot of it is again, the more you take class, the more body aware you become.
And the more strength
body aware, that you're kind of going, oh well, I'll just kind of go right into this, and those are the moments you really hurt yourself, right? So, yeah.
This whole, if we can teach student from the beginning the body awareness and the mind awareness, because then they get the yoga at the same time. They are aware of where they're hurting, where they're putting pressure. I mean, even a little bit discomfort, which is normal, but as long as it's bearable, because a lot of time students, they really don't know, and they're just following someone in the class who is in advance, and they're trying to get on the way following them. As a teacher, that's very important for us to be those kind of students, to identify and help them. When we have like 40 people in the class, 10 people easy to do, but 40 people in the class.
Yeah, and isn't it? It's there's probably a little bit more conversation about that, because all it takes is for a millisecond to have a snap, right? And then what does Bikram say? You can mess with the gods, but you can't mess with the knees, right? So there's more emphasis on making sure that, right, until you become completely aware, all it takes is one little, like, I didn't mean it, I didn't intend to do it, and yet, boom, right?
Yeah, but on the other side of that, sometimes teachers teach this like it's a precariously dangerous posture, which you have a 99% likelihood of destroying your knee, and they teach it like that, and it just puts the fear of God into everybody. And I think it's. I mean, I like how the dialogue approaches, which was basically effectively saying for virtually everybody it's fine, but if you're an actual day one beginner with no idea what you're doing, you could hurt yourself if you rushed into it like a loon. And so, so we kind of focus people's attention on kind of slowing down and calming down, getting that beginner to just don't rush. Don't bend the knee, just put your hands on the floor, get stable, then bend the knee and sit down. Because I think, sometimes we can, particularly in our Western context, we can start to develop concerns above and beyond the actual true reality of there being some kind of concern that's worth paying attention to.
Well, and then the teachers, teach in fear.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. We don't want to be in that element either because, you're right. Then the student's absorbing that energy, right? I mean, like that happened for you, Matt. You talk about your journey with toe stand.
Yes.
Share with everybody what you've shared a few times, which is powerful.
Yes, I think my first couple of classes with toe stand, as a complete raw beginner, I was in a sort of go-getter, try to do things kind of mindset as my first couple of classes, but the teacher told me not to do toe stand and told me, just do tree. So for a year and a half, I stopped trying to do toe stand and I just did tree until eventually I had a different set of teachers, and the teacher looks at me and says, "What are you doing? Do the toe stand." So then my journey began of learning how to do toe stand.
So Matt, what was your first impression when you tried to go down? I think from a toe stand challenged person, like myself, the question of bending the knee or going with the hands first is simply because of the lack of flexibility to be able to bend down with the knee straight, bent, or even slightly bent. Maybe it has to be bent a lot before the hands will even touch the floor. So I think that's where the question is coming from. So do you remember your first time? Were you able to bend over completely and touch your hands?
Yes, but what I did was, I think was probably, I can't specifically vividly remember my first time,
right.
but basically for some time I practiced by basically keeping the leg straight and bending down as much as I could. And because I couldn't reach the floor, then I would bend the knee a little bit just to finish the process of getting my hands on the floor. And of course, once my hands were on the floor, I felt very stable, and it was then easy to work on the next step of the process of fully bending the knee until eventually I was sitting on the heel. So, it was sort of step by step. But I think, if you're bending the knee in a stable way, you're fine. But obviously, if you're precariously upright like this, was trying to bend your knee and come down, having never done it in your entire life at all, then that's not a very safe way to practice toe stand. So we, say to the beginner, put your hands on the floor and be stable.
I think the only danger really is there if you're trying to come down using mainly your leg strength and not having maybe a healthy knee, and then you have all your weight on the knee as you come down and it pops and cracks like that. That might be where I think people get
potentially, but I can't remember where it came up. I think it might have come up in a conversation involving Bikram in a posture clinic.
My point is going forward on your hands takes the weight off the.
Yeah, yes. But there was some conversation that recently I was refreshed in my memory, but I can't remember the source of it, but it was one of the credible scenarios we were talking about, which was talking about the fact that, at a physiological level, the greater risk is not the knee that you're bending. Not the knee that you're on the standing leg, it's the other knee. Because if you have a very, very stiff hip and you lose control of your body, you have momentum, and now you have momentum of the hip versus the knee that was bent to begin with, knee. And you can lose control of your motion. So, and that knee, is potentially vulnerable if you're uncontrolled. And so, again, another reason why that posture is taught with a step-by-step control in the process.
It's just, I can't really speak for Mary, and it's unfortunate she's not here, but I think the question is, because I've seen her practice a lot, is probably a relatively simple one, and what she wrote, and she can contradict me if necessary when she sees the recording. I think what she means is she's coming down, putting her hands on the floor as instructed in the dialogue. I think she's asking, is it necessary to keep the leg dead straight, or can she let it bend a little bit?
Yeah, and the answer would be yes, bend it.
Yes.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yes, Juan, do you want to add anything to that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's nice to have you.
I can see you.
Sorry to join in so late, but no, I just realized that my microphone doesn't work on what you call on speaker, so I have to get one of those earphones, the microphone from the ear. Anyway, No, I did have one time a friend who said that he claimed that he busted his knee because he did not bend the knee on the way down.
And he busted the standing one or the bent one?
Standing, I would think.
No, I think the bent one. But so I don't know. I think that most people's knees are in a precarious state, so they don't even know what is really coming to them. But it comes more from distraction and disaligning as you go down than anything else. To like twisting slightly sideways.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm
No,
assuming.
you're right. You see that, and again, that's that unconsciousness, not being body aware, right? You know, too, and your knees kind of torquing to one side. I think the other thing too is there's a little bit more eagerness in that posture because it is so different, and we're there, and I think people have, you know, there's a little bit of excitement to try to do it, which is great, right? You know, too. And you can see people get a really big aha moment, right? You know,
Yes.
I mean, I remember my sister and the kids when they first took class, I think they were enamored by toe stand, right? I think a lot of people, you know, are like, wow, right? So, you know, there could be that extra enthusiasm in there too, and that might prevent you from being, you know, a little bit more safe, you know, so. But yeah, I think the question, you're right, Sarah, is kind of just like if she's been doing this over and over again. I mean,
she's just asking.
Yeah,
she's doing different things, and
hard
she's
and fast rule, or yeah. Were you going to say something, Rajashree? I interrupted you.
No, exactly. I mean, it's bent, it's okay. But I was going to say, I love that posture, even if I cannot stay there whole time, but I love it when I try to go there and touch the floor, the stretching I feel back of my leg in the whole hamstring and hips area. So that's why I think also many people try to feel that, you know, in the postures. It's eager to be on at, you know, intermediate side of the pose, I will call intermediate or advanced, but at the same time it's challenging and it's also feeling good. So it's if the right knee, which if you're going through the, you know, left leg straight, if you're making left foot up and going through the right leg straight, but you just have to be comfortable. That's definitely, it's a key word, that your foot is not slipping out and you're not aware of your knee. If not aware of your knee, try to bend it and see, because I have seen a lot of people now that they bend the knee and then they stuck there, you know, like they are just bending for.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they can't go all the way, but they start coming down, bend the knee, and they just go there. And that's where they're stuck. And studios are letting them do that way. I have seen that also.
Yeah. We do have another question from the online, from Linda. Linda's in a parking lot, so she's muted because it's kind of noisy in the background. But her question is for the sit-up. Do we have palms together or palms facing up to the ceiling when we come up from the sit-up? Thank you. Nice simple one.
Rajashree, do you understand?
No, you guys tell, because you're teaching every.
Well, I've got a dialogue in front of me, and this is what it says. Toes and heels together. Fix your feet, keep your heels on the floor. Arms over your head, cross your thumbs, arms and head together. It doesn't have an opinion, but I don't think that's the most important thing. It's an interesting, because I know people fuss about it. You're absolutely right to ask, but
yes,
like a lot of.
Yes, I've always understood it to be
me too.
palms facing up, thumbs crossed.
Yes. But I'm not sure I disciplined someone who did it the other way. You know, yeah.
But sometimes people like to do that. They try to feel like coming up like that.
Yeah.
A lot of time they go down and then they grab the big toes that way.
Exactly. If you have them like that, it's easy to grab. Yes. So thumbs crossed is the only instruction. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the things where there is probably a subtle difference in the structure of the shoulder when you do one way or the other, but I'm not sure that it's material.
I have a question now.
Oh, yes.
My question is, like, more and more people are coming up and they're asking, oh, my studio teaches this way, my studio teaches the other way. So like this one, when we do the breathing, And when we do the half moon, somebody is tight on the shoulder, deltoid is not enough flexible, and constantly teachers saying, stretch up, stretch up, stretch up. Now, they're maybe like that. So then they say, oh, they're trying to do, they're not. Then they try to go with their shoulder up and try to bring the shoulder touching the ear. They think they're stretching enough. The same way in a half moon, you're holding it and they say, no, you're not doing enough. So they try to do that. Yes. And when they come back, they say, just to be doing that much stretching, their shoulder hurts now.
Yeah.
So this is something is going on in the studios because how we say it, maybe the dialogue, the way we should keep it that way, not add on anything. What do you think?
Well, the dialogue is stretched up out of the waist.
Right.
So,
yes.
I think some teachers fail to say that part.
Yes. And then
out of the waist.
So, yeah.
But I think it's also, I think it's even not just people adding different instructions into the mix that confuse that. I think it's also even the intonation of how they say what's in the dialogue that, you know, if you teach it like it's a goal to have the result, it encourages an action in the person that's a little bit different than if you just say, take the action. So if I say stretch up out of the waist and try and touch the ceiling, and I say it like that, that's a straightforward set of instruction that I can work on. And it's not implied that there's a good and a bad version of that. There's only trying to do it the right way with some degree of intensity. But when it's all like, no, more, you know, like when the emphasis is like, no, you're 2 inches too short. You've got to go even more. You've got to go even more. Like it becomes like teaching, like coaching a performance. And coaching for results and outcomes, and then I think it's something else. It's not our traditional yoga anymore, and I think then people are pushing themselves beyond their natural movement structure and hurting themselves. At least that's the impression I get.
I'm going to add something, and Juan, if you want to chime in. Excuse me. I remember at teacher training, Rajashree, you gave a great clinic one morning. And specifically talked about, because I think sometimes the and half moon too, especially if you're newer, you know, you might have more success in thinking that you're stretching up and over using the shoulder blades as opposed to using the hips, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is you start to have the hunched shoulders, right? But you're thinking that you're stretching up and over, right, to the right or left side. And you even said, wait, no, it's not your shoulder blades. You have to move your hips. Right? So,
right.
You know, and again, it's that body awareness thing, right? Too, you know.
I think it takes people a while, particularly in that specific scenario. I think it takes people a while to understand what it really even means to stretch up out of the waist. So you see people come up onto their toes momentarily. It's like, no, you're stretching out of your toes. It's stretched out of your waist.
And another thing happened. I felt it just teaching some people, other studios, like where they don't know the 26 and 2 Bikram series postures. You know, like the stillness we do, and a lot of that stretching is done with like Ashtanga and other is more with the momentum, you know, with the movement. And when you are not in the movement, when you are there, they are constantly thinking, I'm not maybe stretching enough, or how I hold myself for that long, you know, 10 to 20 seconds is maybe I have to use my power of shoulder, because easier to do that than anything else. Like we try always using something more, whatever we have stronger in our joints, you know, that's what we do. And that's the time we don't support enough muscles, support neuromuscular structure to support the joint. We actually overuse the joint.
Yeah.
And
yes.
That my whole life, because I was being flexible.
Yes.
I used to bend more than what I need to do. But later in my life, I started understanding when you bend and the amount you need to bend, you know, you should not bend over and under. I mean, I'm talking right now, but it's again, same thing. It's become a demonstration of the postures, how far you can go beyond, or is it that a healthier way of doing practice that getting benefit to your therapy, to your body, a therapeutic benefit to your body. So a lot of time, that's where is a misconception happen.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank
Well
you for
said.
bringing it up.
Yeah. Juan, you have something to add to that? All that?
No.
Are you sure?
You know
No,
what? Right now, Juan, I have to say, because your face is in shadow, because the light is behind you, you look like one
I know.
of the CIA informants. That where the face can't be revealed.
Oh, Matt, you just blew his cover.
With his ear strings. Yeah. It's awesome.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all good.
I'm actually, I'm actually at my dad's house. I'm trying to be discreet because it's almost midnight here. But no, it's okay. They're watching TV. It doesn't matter. No, I had two questions to ask you guys at one point, but I'll wait for the right time whenever that comes.
Well, how about now?
Okay, I have a student who has leukemia who just got it in November out of the blue. Early 40s, and now she's gone. I think she's gone 2 chemo treatments in, and she has 2 to go, and she's wondering whether she could go back to the practice. And as far as I could remember, I was under the impression that one of the very few counterindications for the practice was leukemia. So I don't even know what to tell her, because I mean, up until this point, it was not something that I had really, seen or experienced. So I don't know if you have any recommendations, because I mean, supposedly the cancer is under control, but she still has 2 treatments to go. So I don't know if the heat and the extra circulation, the rest of it, is something which, given her condition, is advisable, or she should wait. I don't know.
I can answer this because I usually tell students, if they're going through the chemo, not to do it. Let body heal, then start.
Mm-hmm.
That's
she has, I think, yeah.
That's
the way I understand.
And my personal advice, because it's just something I feel comfortable having. If she is my student coming into the class and she's going through, chemo, when you start, it's a really not, it's something very difficult. And so when 2 more to go, see, it's not about the chemo only. So she will be in the class right now. So many other, immunity is low that time.
Yeah.
And so many other people are there and she's exposed to. So you have to be very healthy to take chemo. And when you finish the chemo, then you don't have to worry about that. I mean, you must have very limited access, because you need to be, you know what I'm talking about, Michele. Yeah, because
100%. And I think that what you said to me has great weight. And in order for you to manage chemo, you really need to have a strong immune system. So in this case, I agree, Juan, that, less is more, that she go through the chemo, and then my recommendation is, if she's a regular practitioner and has been, and then the chemo is over, the moment she feels ready, she should come back and just be aware and go slow, be in the back of the room or front, whatever, and and use it for comfort and leaning into it. And this is helping my body, all those good things that make your mind actually more peaceful too, instead of being all squirrely about, oh my God, I just had chemo. All that. I understand what you're saying about the heat thing, although I don't know.
She can do yoga. She can do yoga at home if she can feel comfortable, like it's just a light. She shouldn't make hot. Chemo it takes a lot of energy away. They have to, like 6-7 days, then slowly they start getting the energy back. So you have to understand that, and there is a period, there's a waiting period, so your body get healed, and again you do it. So 2 more is there. She can practice at home, but don't avoid her going into the classroom. That's all I'm saying. And she doesn't need to practice strong, intense, because a lot of time when they are in chemo, they want to feel that they're normal. So but anyone is sick that when you are isolated, you don't feel like that, you feel that same way in the mind. So she can do like a breathing, a little stretching, floor poses, not to make her too tired, because you don't want that. She needs to be very careful with her food. She can walk outside, like if where is very empty, like choose the place time that walking is great, because it's a fresh air in the morning or the afternoon, not crowded place. That's all I'm saying, to avoid that. For the immune system is so low, weak that time, and you don't want something else come in and create a problem with the chemo next dose.
I think from what she told me, if I understand correctly, it's a treatment where they go in for about 3 weeks. So they're inside the hospital, do chemo, and then they have like 2 or 3 weeks break to recover. And then they have another treatment, and there's 4 treatments in total. So she's been in since the beginning of November. She's like halfway through the treatment. Now she's in her break, as it were, from the chemo. And it's almost at zero, the cancer, as it were. But still, there's 2 scheduled more stays, as it were, in the hospital.
They have to be cautionary. It's a course they go through.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether it's still a danger for her to come into the room, or whether she can still, whether it would help.
If you ask me, I have seen several of near dear to me, and they have gone through a very easy way and finishing all the chemo, because it's great news that she is able to, because she's young, so she's able to finish it, because a lot of time, body doesn't actually adjust the treatment very easily. So they need a lot of halt. But that's why I'm just saying.
Okay.
One story, which is not of somebody in the middle of chemo, but somebody who had literally just finished their chemo. An older Indian lady came to one of my classes years ago. Arpana was her name. Lovely old lady, never done yoga before. And she's wearing a headscarf, she's lost her hair, and she comes into the class. And it's only literally, I think, like a week after she's done chemo. Very, very, very frail. And, you give her instructions on how to sort of set the right expectations so that she practiced. And she practiced as best she could, very slowly, very gently through the class. She came out afterwards, and I started to say to her, well, ideally, if you can. I didn't, at this point, know she had cancer, but I had a suspicion. And I said to her, well, you should practice at least 3 times a week, good regular practice, but, each day is going to be different. You meet it where you're at. And she leaned into me. She said, could I practice every day? And I said, well, yes, if you're properly hydrated and you're properly eating, yes, you can. And still every day is going to be different. And she said, oh, good. And she practiced every day for 60 days. She literally did 60 consecutive days. And each day was, she sat down a lot. She took it slow and steady. She didn't push it too much. But every single day she got stronger and stronger and happier and more vibrant, to the point where she was basically skipping into the class. And at some point in that, I think day 45, about 6 or 7 of her family members, extended family members, all showed up because they wanted to understand what the hell was going on, that how she could recover from this awful chemo so quickly. So that's the only anecdote I have to share, that was just this wonderful story of recovery from a person who did, was realistic in her expectations. She took each day where she was at, but she just kept leaning in and kept showing up and just got stronger and healthier. But that was at the end of her chemo. It wasn't in the middle of her chemo.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
After the
chemo. Thanks.
What is second question?
Oh, the second question is on a personal note. It's I have neuralgia in the right shoulder. And I was recommended by one of these makeshift nutritionists to take B12. I think it was B1, B6, B12 combination. And I consented, and I took it for a few months. And I've pretty much finished the treatment, and now the neuralgia has come back with a vengeance. So I'm a little bit worried because it hurts right at the plexus of the right shoulder. And I don't know whether I should just go back to B12 and will now be addicted to it for a long time, or, you know, I'm not sure exactly what to make of it. But it stemmed from one of those I don't know what they're called, magnetic treatments or something they do with electrodes on the shoulder after the accident. And it basically burnt the sheath, I think, off the nerve. So it hurts like whenever I carry a backpack or something like that. It's really kind of uncomfortable. So I don't know if there's anything I should do. I read in I think it was Dr. Das's book that Karnopitasana, you know, before shoulder stand is supposed to be helpful for neuralgia. But I don't know what your take on that is.
Try it. Because I will only go by asanas. I won't talk about vitamins. So I will say that you try it. Why not? Yeah, do it as, you know, as not so much pressure, but you can try.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can offer about the B12 is just because I've had B12 deficiency in the past, is that the B12 is strongly connected to the sheath of nerves. So people who have a chronic B12 deficiency can have problems with deterioration of the sheathing of the nerves, which can then lead to longer term problems. So the B12 is definitely something that making sure you have enough in your diet is probably a good thing, whether that's supplement or natural sources.
But from what I understand, the actual dose recommended for most neuralgias is something in the order of, because of course it's stemmed from animal protein, if I understand, and you'd have to be taking about 40 kilograms of beef per day to get the equivalent, you know, one of those pills. So it's not really something you can derive logically from nutrition alone. You have to take some kind of supplements. And what I suspect is that basically I may have had a light B12 deficiency, but now it's gone to the point where, because I was taking for the last few months and have exhausted the treatment, that I've become dependent upon it, and now it's going, like, you know, backwards, like withdrawal, as it were.
Oh, I see.
So I don't know, maybe I've just become a B12 vampire. You know,
it's become a big thing, though. Don't you guys see the B12 you know, shops out there?
Naturopaths give shots. They have clinics where you go and get your B12
available.
I'm with you on, there's something not so good about that, right? So
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
If I have to eat half a cow for it.
Yeah. But I would be curious for you to try, you know, the posture, you know, just, I mean, that seems kind of interesting. Just, I never thought of that. Like the prep.
Well, the thing is that I haven't done advanced in a long time. I've been thinking about getting back into it, and it's something that, because I'm aware that if you don't do it, you know, I am losing here and there little, you know, abilities. So over time, so I think I have to get back into it. I'm just, I guess, looking for pretexts to go back to it.
Yeah, but I mean, make sure that you're not, you know, then hurting that with the other postures and.
But also you could be,
I don't know.
You know, like, I mean, the Iyengar's treat shoulder stand as something that they think you should do daily for many, many minutes. You know, so you know the shoulder stand and the Karnapidasana are two very healthy things that could be part of a regular practice, whether you're doing the rest of the range of the 84.
Yeah, I agree. And if I'm curious about this one, because when you talk about the prep work, do you mean like plow? And then moving into,
I think knees to ears, you know, the one where you have
for me,
that's book mentions it, but
that's one of the ones I love. I feel, I mean, and that is interesting. I never thought about it. It could be, think about, right, as Emmy would teach it, right? Sorry, that's my broken refrigerator. But you know, when you do plow, you know, as Emmy would teach it, right? You make sure you extend your legs each time, right? You hold each time a little further, Imagine what that's doing, right? To your shoulders, right? Just slowly.
I think my concern is predominantly the fact that, you know, from a muscular point of view, it seems like abuse is always something that develops a muscle. well, almost always develops the muscle. You can of course strain it, but from a muscular point of view, you know, some kind of strain is what develops muscle mass in any way. But as far as nerves are concerned, I'm not sure that's really the right, you know, approach. That's all.
Well, I think, you know, as opposed to like the bouncing plows that you do in advance, to do Karnapadasana calmly is a very relaxing posture. You know, I mean, it's a posture which you can go into and spend 10 minutes in that posture. I mean, it's not often done that way, but it is part of a restorative sequence in other styles of yoga. You know, when it's done by somebody who has the competency to be able to execute it. So that you shouldn't be in undue or extreme tension in Karnapadasana. If you are, then probably it's not for you. But you know, obviously you've practiced a lot, so you know you'll know that your body's relaxing into Karnapadasana rather than tensing into it.
Juan, do you remember how you started? Was it from an injury or something, or did it just gradually just increase slowly?
It was a combination of things. First of all, I had a period of stress about 5 years ago, whereby I got what do you call an infection that you get as a kid and manifests when you're adult in a different way. And in my shoulder, I felt like the burning, and so they gave me some kind of antiviral, whatever it was, for a while. I kind of didn't finish the course completely, which I understand is not really the adequate thing. And then it kind of went away. And then when I had this accident, I got run over and I hit my neck and the rest of it. They put some electric treatment on the shoulder, on the plexus specifically. And directly afterwards, that pain came back like pronouncedly. And then, you know, little by little, it went away again. I was like, I tried to like eat liver for a while because I thought maybe that was the right thing to do. And it seemed to help at the time whenever I had bouts of it, you know, from stress or whatever it was. But I don't think it recovered ever completely. And then lastly, now that I finished this B12 treatment, and I've been, you know, moving around, moving houses and loading a lot of weight, that's when it's gone the worst that I've ever felt it. I mean, I could still do knees to ears posture. I can do just about anything. The only thing is when I'm like loading weight on my shoulders for a long time, like traveling, it gets really, really like painful, like sharp pain. So I'm just hoping that it's going to subside, but I'm not sure exactly how. That's all.
Sorry, Juan. Yeah, gets better.
That's okay. Yeah.
I have to.
Can I just ask you, what I just am interested, when Juan said, would Karnapadasana be helpful? Can you give specific reasons why Karnapadasana would be helpful? Just so I understand it. She froze.
No.
We froze.
Are you asking someone specific?
I was asking Rajashree.
Okay. Because, you know, there is a certain place, it's not stretching. It's more about, it's putting the pressure, the threshold, where is the irritation is happening, and when is a consistent pressure of the 5 seconds or 10 seconds, as long as the person is holding. And when you release it, it's really bringing the good proper circulation and active nervous system. So the nerves, where was a damage and was really movement, it was feeling like a hang on it. It's like a pinching, as movement, all this. So when the Karnapadasana, there is no other. You can't do the headstand. You cannot do with the headstand, but you can do Karnapadasana, you can do the shoulder stand. But the shoulder stand is sometimes it's not enough stretch also. Karnapadasana, if you look at it, the person's head and the lower vertebrae of the neck, or the first one of the neck, is there. And basically everything is stretching and going up there. So the way it's create the direct pressure, the threshold of that particular nerve it's go into, for it stimulates, and it's just a hold, and it's like putting like a acupressure, you know, like our acupuncture, going into and pinching it and let it be revived again. And so this is what's going on. That's why the Karnapadasana is another one also good. One is cobra pose. if you can hold it, the cobra, do you feel pain on the cobra?
The most pain I feel, no. To answer your question to the point, not in cobra. The sharpest pain I feel is in the first awkward. Sitting down in the chair and stretching the arm forward, that's when it's the sharpest pain. That and probably standing head to knee when I bring the elbows down. Apart from that, surprisingly, most of the postures, I don't even feel it. Not in eagle, not in, and I do headstand also. But yeah, no, the sharpest pain is in first awkward.
I have something up with my right shoulder, not quite the same as what you're describing, but I have tremors in it, and there's some kind of nerve damage, and I have a tremor in my right arm. One I found to be quite helpful in my personal practice is a variation of shoulder stand. Where usually you shoulder stand, your hands are behind your back, supporting your back. There's a variation where the hands are in exactly the opposite direction. They're in front of your head. So they're stretched out in front of you in the opposite direction. And it's a particularly interesting position for the shoulder to be in. It's a bit like first part awkward, but you're upside down, of course, in shoulder stand. And it puts the shoulders in a position where you can use them muscularly, but it seems the best way I can describe it is it feels like a very natural way to use the shoulder. And so it can be done like that. Yes, it can be done like that, or with the arms straight out. But but you're really learning to lift through the back, through the shoulders, up through the hips and to the legs, the knees, the ankles, the toes. But it puts the shoulders in a particularly healthy position. And I found that that's a really good one for my shoulder structure, that and Kanapidasana as well.
No, but it's the same.
I'll try.
Part you are using it exactly. That's why.
Yeah, it makes sense. That was a great way to describe it, Rajashree. Thank you for asking.
I have to leave today early, so I have to go. Sorry, it was so nice seeing you. We'll meet again next time.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Rajashree, for coming.
Thanks, Rajashree.
Bye, soon. Bye.
We do have another. Well, actually, I should ask: are there any more questions for anybody who's here? If you're muted and you want to put a question in the chat, that works too. I also have. Go on, Jeff.
Yeah, I have two questions. Well, about two postures that are very similar, and it's from a teacher point of view, basically, in the sense that there's a lot of people in standing separate legs stretching, and in the stretching posture at the very end, the head to knee, then stretching on the floor. If they can't reach their feet, what the best way is to get them to get that stretch? It doesn't seem like when their knees are bent. Let's take the stretching posture at the end of the class.
Paschimottanasana.
Right, the head to knee and then stretching. So when the knees are still bent and they're trying to walk their hips back, they don't have enough flexibility really to walk much. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of stretching going on there. If it's all right to have them to straighten the legs and then pull on the under the calves or Achilles tendon or wherever they can reach and get a stretch going that way, because they can't reach their feet or their toes with the knees locked. The other one is the standing separate leg is the same thing. A lot of people can't reach their feet without their knees bending.
Yeah, I would treat the two separately for the moment.
Yeah,
because I think it's a little easier. I mean, at least I would say with the stretching Paschimottanasana is you try the right way as best you can. So when you grab the toes, and you have to bend the knees because that's the only way you can reach the toes.
Right.
And once you pull on the toes as hard as possible, which is the next instruction, head up, chin up, please. Look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Walk your hips back. Right, left, right, left, right, left. So the very act of pulling on your toes and lifting your chest and your head and your chin up to create tension in your arms and your spine, and then trying to walk your hips back, right, left, right, left, right, left, is creating all the tensions to cause all the right muscles to start to work that lead you towards the point where your legs are eventually straight.
Okay.
So if you don't do those things, you're just going to stay where you are.
Yeah, Matt demonstrates that one sometimes really well, because sometimes, Jeff, I think when we're learning to do that, we sometimes we disregard that part, right? Where we ask you to move your hips back, right, left, but it's a necessary tool, right? So it's not kind of waddling your butt here or there, right? It's, pulling on your toes and walking just the hips back, right? So that you start to create.
A lot of people who are so tight in the hips and the legs don't get that action very well.
Yes,
So
but to you, they're not, maybe, but they are. Remember, the whole class has happened prior to that. And that is a very common place, I think, for people to be tight. But they are, right? Think about even that. I mean, there's friction happening. They are, right? It's just not as evident and as fast as we want it to be, right?
So we have a whole section in the fall. We have a stretching and compression workshop, and we dig into this subject more specifically in the workshop. But the hamstrings are stiff because they're not stiff like mechanically, like dried up pieces of leather. They're stiff electromechanically. They're stiff because the person's not using their thigh muscles. And so when they pull on their feet and they lift their chest up and they keep their head up and they create tension in their upper body, that gives them the ability to connect to the lower body and to the thighs to begin the process of thawing. Because, as they start to use their thigh muscles, their hamstrings will start to play nice in the process. And so it's like a process of retraining the body rather than treating it like a mechanical scenario where you're trying to pull along a long piece of something and you're trying to just mechanically stretch it and kind of semi-break it until it's eventually as long as you want it to be. That's not what's happening in the body with the muscles, even though we use the same term stretching. So this is really an exercise in getting the different parts of your body to work together in unison with correct timing and correct engagement, and then it all sort of works smoothly. So it's more like tuning an engine's timing belts than it is overcoming a mechanical problem where a bolt's too short or something. And that's why the technique's so important. And so finding a way to sort of circumvent to get to the next piece might seem to generate progress, but it isn't really, because it's going around the corner of the problem, skipping over the problem.
The other thing is, along the same lines, that for a person, the sort of person that you're talking about, it's not that they're missing out on the main event. That is their main event. That is for them right now. And if they spend time doing it, then the next part will actually come relatively quickly. It takes them 2 years to get their hips in the right place, their legs locked. But that is their main event, walking the hips back and learning. Then the light bulb comes on, then they can do the next bit. They're not missing anything. They're getting every benefit they could get.
Okay. And the standing separate leg stretching?
When the standard separate leg stretching, it's it's extremely similar in the sense of doing the stretching, but some aspects of it are different in that you've got gravity helping you, and so there's a lot of emphasis on the use of the legs, because the legs are now very, very active from the get-go because you're standing on them. And so locking the knees is coming at this problem from the bottom rather than the top. In Paschimotto, you start with the arms and the upper body. In standing separate leg stretching, you start with the legs. And so the knees lock throughout the posture. Then you grab the heels. If you can't grab the heels, grab the outside of the feet. And then obviously, if you've got something you cannot grab the outside of the feet, then
if you can't grab the outsides of the feet.
So then they would, they should try and grab the outside of the feet, but obviously if they're really not getting anywhere close, then they might be getting their calf muscles. Now, if they can pull in and down, anybody can move a fraction of a millimeter by effort. So if they can do that, then they can slide their hands down a tiny bit and pull in and down and a bit more. And then there's other parts to the dialogue which are really, really important and often get overlooked, aside from keeping the knees locked. Roll forward like a wheel. Bring the weight forward into the toes. The moment you do that, your body will automatically cause the front thigh muscles to contract more, causing the back hamstrings to relax more, giving you more range of motion, allowing you to come more down. And again, then they can slide their hands down a little further. So each day, millimeter by millimeter, they get closer to grabbing their feet. But they're also really importantly learning how to use the middle of their body. That folding action in the middle of the body, which but from a slightly different angle, from a standing.
But I know that Michelle and Juan were exposed to Bikram talking about this, so there's going to be a really interesting answer. But just this sounds very stupid, Jeff. But for one or two people, it's worked. Pointing out what actually is their lower spine for one or two people has solved the whole problem.
Okay.
So the front coming down from the lower spine, right down the coccyx, not the lumbar spine. All right, and but two or three people is and then they just did it. All right, so it's like it's not going to work for all of these people. But it's like, it sounds so dumb, but it was like, but it worked. But then Michelle,
what term did you use then? If you didn't use lower spine, what term did you use if you didn't?
I pointed out what it was.
Oh,
so actually, on myself, I pointed where it was, so they knew where to come down from. You know, I have no shame. It's like, but I also told people that coccyx, stretching from the coccyx to the toes, the coccyx to the foot. That's not the lumbar spine. The fact that the pain med ads like to call that the lower back. You know, that's not the lowest part of the spine. And literally, one person who'd been practicing a long time, he got it then, just knowing which part he was supposed to be coming down from.
That understanding is critical.
Yes, yeah.
Good.
Sure.
Well, a couple of things. I agree. I think when we don't say the dialogue right too, and again, people not aware that what it means to come down from the lower spine, and they come down, and then they start to come down from the waist, right? You start to see that, right? They're not coming down anymore from the lower spine, right? They go to a certain point, and then they come down from the waist, right? And that's limiting them also. It's coming down from the lower. Again, I don't think we take the time to really keep coming down from the lower spine. It says, go slow, right? Come down, chin up, and then keep pulling and come down from the lower spine, grab your heels. So, having awareness, right, of where your lower spine is, right, is coming down from your lower spine. That and actually it's one of the biggest areas of I think we lose range of motion when we come down from the lower spine, which is why the Bikram yoga is so important.
I think that's what's meant by that posture specifically, that is also stated, you're straight from the coccyx to the neck. The spine is straight from the coccyx to the neck, forehead touching the floor between the feet. I think that's what pointing out that stretching of the lower spine is from that statement too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's repeated many times.
Yes.
Right? in the dialogue of that posture.
Thank you. That's great.
One, I know maybe you were there. This is an interesting one because back in the day, Bikram would have you put your hands on the floor in front of you, and then slowly walk your hands back and grab your heels from the outside. In this particular teacher training, remember Juan, he had the gentleman put his elbows down.
He mentioned that also in the training.
On the floor. And this is Bikram. I'm certainly not equipped. I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that. But one of the said I don't know. I shouldn't say I'm not comfortable, Juan. I think it would take me 10 minutes to say it. You know what I mean? And then the posture, everybody's out of it. I would do it, but I don't think I could. I need to practice it to make it where it's like succinct and stuff. But Bikram is adamant, that your legs are locked.
Yes.
Right, and all the other things, the hands on the floor, the elbows, your legs have to be locked, right? In order to start this process, whatever that process is, whether you grab around the ankles.
If the knees are not locked, you simply aren't going to get the connection. I mean, you aren't going to understand the relationship of the legs to the hips, to the abdomen, to the spine. It simply won't happen if the knees are bent. That's why he does that elbows to the ground. It's a very powerful way of, when you bend the elbows and try and bring the elbows forward, it helps you bring the entire torso from the hips down into the process. And I think it was in my training, or maybe it was when I visited Sarah's, I can't remember. He had one person who was really struggling with it, and he had some people help him by putting a towel around the person's waist, very low down at the hip crease, and pulling that whilst they then leant forward over it, trying to get them to understand how to go over that so that they really were bending from the lower spine and actually using their legs and their hips. And Iyengar rather famously, I don't think he did it in his later years, but in his early years, quite famously, would use a fork. And he would use a fork or a pointed piece of metal, and he would push it into people's hip creases until they learned how to use their hip crease to bend forward, and of course using their legs. But obviously that's rather extreme.
But you can see, going back to the other one, the Paschimottanasana, that walking back is actually the same principle. Yeah. It's like the fork, but you're doing it for yourself and you're learning. Yeah. Or the towel.
Yeah. To get an understanding of, right, you know, that area that needs to.
Exactly.
But I think there's a meta issue, Jeff, about, you know, all of the postures. You know, there's probably every posture there's some some analogy to this, which is that you put the body, you take a set of actions in the body, and you put the body into a position in a sequence of actions, and there's a certain amount of a continuation of doing those actions, even though it's difficult. That the continuation of doing it creates the time where the body, the brain, the physiology adjust. And so if you find ways to sidetrack or make it easier or make it less difficult, then you literally avoid the learnings that are there to be found. You know, when you hold something in tension, and at some point you're going to breathe, and at some point your body goes, ah, and it gets something a little bit, and then the next day it'll get something a little bit more, but it won't do it if you just go in and come straight out, or you kind of go, oh no, this isn't working, it's too difficult. So that's why it's really important for us to encourage the people who are struggling to keep working through that struggle and be in that struggle calmly but breathing, because that's when they are going to get those breakthroughs.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Juan, did you want to add anything? I'm just curious.
I think Juan just disappeared.
We might have lost him, actually. It was quite late there.
Okay.
Yeah. Past midnight.
I do want to, you know, reemphasize too that, you know, Bikram said it over and over a zillion times in teacher training, right? That you have to try 100% the right way. I mean,
oh, there he is.
Right. So, Juan, do you want to add something to that when what you heard it, what your knowledge and, you know, teacher training with this posture?
You're muted, Juan. You're still muted.
Juan, you need to unmute.
You see your lips moving.
There you go. Good.
Nope.
No.
Unmute. There you go.
There you go.
Sorry, it got disconnected. I understand it mutes itself automatically when you get disconnected.
Yes, it does.
The last few seconds I didn't hear, but are you still talking about standing separate legged
Yes.
to the floor?
Yeah. Any thoughts you had?
No, I think you pretty much addressed most of it.
Is there anything you see? I mean, it's a challenging posture, for sure.
Well, I think no. I mean, I think the only reason to bend the knees is to grab the heels. Once you've got the heels, and there's no more need to bend the knees. That's something that a lot of people have doubt about. I don't know why. But
what do you mean? So bend the knees to grab the heels and then work on locking the knees? Is that what you're saying?
Well, some people get stuck with the knees bent, and they refuse to straighten them out because they're under the impression that it will protect their back. Or I'm not sure exactly what their misapprehension is. Yeah. But a lot of people use it as an excuse to keep them bent. No, but I mean, in a lot of cases, the best way to grab the heels is to bend the knee a little bit. But then once you have the grip, that's it. But Jeff's question was about.
Yeah, he was just questioning, right, if somebody can't grab the heels.
Or the feet.
Or the feet.
Nothing.
Nothing, can't grab anything.
just lean onto the hands. That's it. I mean, if it's someone who's morbidly obese or has some kind of, or fused vertebrae, then just lean onto the hands, whatever it takes, and stay there as long as it takes. I mean, I think that it's in a lot of cases, people would really benefit from staying there even longer. So, when Bikram talks about, what's that?
I so agree.
Right.
And Bikram, go ahead. I'll add to that in a second. Yeah.
No. I'll finish. It's very simple. It's just a matter of like, I mean, to a certain degree, three things are interchangeable: either time, heat, and effort. To a certain degree, not completely interchangeable. So, I mean, if people just stay there a little bit longer, already the body begins to yield, to give in to the pressure. So, and sometimes that's all the magic that's required. So.
Yeah. That's great. That's beautifully said. Yeah, that's true. Sarah, I'm thinking of you on this because you and I saw this clip with Bikram, right? Where, I mean, obviously it's about the spine, right? And then here he is, he's telling you to stretch, pull and stretch. Right? He's like so mad. Stretch your spine. Because that's the other thing too, talk about getting stuck, right? Then once we've got it and the legs are locked and we have the grip, it's like, you gotta pull, right? And start
stretching. I think, you said something, Michele, about, having them try to lock their knees. And I would say that they shouldn't try and lock their knees. I really, in that particular posture, I think they should just lock their knees.
I mean, that's what I mean.
Well, I think
I know.
I'm just saying that Bikram was really unyielding about that. That was my point. He was unyielding. Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of teachers get into the mindset, as we see it taught, of that particular standing separate leg stretching. They get into the mindset where they start to believe that the student can't straighten their legs, and that's not true. I've seen it, hundreds of students who are perfectly capable of straightening their legs, but not in that posture. And the reason they don't straighten their legs in that posture is because they're not bringing their weight forward. And the moment you convince them to get past their fear of falling over and bring their weight forward, you'll see their legs straighten. When the weight's all the way back in the heels and the bum is sticking backwards, the knees are going to bend. They're just going to bend.
Well, you got to say the dialogue.
Yeah,
exactly.
And get them to try, to navigate their way into it.
But I think that there's two things that are quite separate. In my case, from personal experience, because that's usually what I based anything that I relate to others upon. Having had basically almost destroyed ACLs and bowed legs, there's two things. One of them is allowing the legs to straighten, to stretch out fully. Another thing is to contract the thigh. And for me, I mean, contracting the thigh can have, traumatic connotations especially if you had a traumatic injury. Whereas actually just relaxing the legs and allowing them to straighten is something which is a lot more, reachable. Yes. So I think that those two things have to be distinguished, because when you say lock the knees, it kind of, the implication is that you have to contract the thigh. So I think that those can be divided into two separate instructions. They can be distinguished, and they don't necessarily have to be what's the word? Not correlated.
Collapsed together.
Confused.
Yeah.
Conflated. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Right. So, and a lot of the time, to be frank, even in standing, bouncing postures on one leg, I don't contract the thigh. It really. I have to be like in a position where I'm really like confident and comfortable to like allow myself to contract the thigh. If not, I just let it straighten, and that's it, like as best as it can. Just thinking of, especially you have a lot of trauma, especially with ACL rupture, whatever it may be, and you have both legs. I mean, I know one time, Bikram held me up in standing bow, and I literally felt it go a little bit further, even tearing. Oh. So it's just, I don't know. It's just, I kind of, as Bikram himself says, you can mess with anything else. But that's one thing that I think people have a very, very deep, in my case, at least, apprehension about.
Yeah.
Locking only when it's a confidence game. It's like, if I feel comfortable, then I don't mind contracting the thigh. But most of the time, I'm not even in that place. Like I have to be really warmed up, really, the weight has to be evenly distributed. I have no tension. Then I don't mind, contracting the thigh. Of course, I'm comparing it to the bouncing postures, but in this case, it's not as scary because, of course, you're on both legs. But yeah, no, that's all I wanted to mention.
No, I think it's a really useful distinction. I often will say straighten your leg and lock your knee to try and get clear to somebody who's struggling that take that step of trying to straighten your leg and then maybe you get to the next step of actually locking your knee. And for some people, they can wrap their head around trying to straighten the leg as their first step, even if they haven't quite wrapped their head around their locking of the knee. Yeah, we do have another online question. From one of our long-term online practitioners, Lenora.
Oh.
She had a question as kind of a nice little simple question, I think. How to come out of Janushirasana, head to knee pose with stretching pose. The call to raise arms happens, but then it's just switch. Then when going back to the sit-up, I thought we have our hands over our head and then we come up in the sit-up. Some places have you keep your arms up and twist between the right leg and left leg. Some places do not. I'm confused. I think the question is a little confusing, but if I try and give my interpretation of what she said, which is basically when concentrating more on the switch, when you start Janushirasana and you bring one leg out, arms over your head, you turn, you grab the foot, then how do you get from there to the second side? And sometimes people teach very specifically to lift your arms up, keep your arms over your head, turn your body to face the left leg, then come down, grab the other. And then some people are less specific in the instruction of that transition from the right leg to the left leg. And I think she's a little confused about the variation in how that's taught.
I'm smiling because old school is people had their arms up.
Well, it's interesting, and a couple of times in teacher training, it's been said it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the first set, you've got this dialogue. I can read it to you. Turn around, sit facing the mirror. Right leg out cornerwise, bend your left leg. Put your left foot so you should touch the costume. Create pressure with the left foot sole against the right leg biceps to the thigh muscle. Your two legs should be 90 degree angle like L. Arms over the head. Turn to the right. So, without going next to the additional dialogue, why would you do something different on the other side? You're trying to, have the same experience as much as possible one side or the other. So unless you're very adept, keeping the arms up is going to completely change the structure of the second side.
Because what happens, right, is you see people just whip their leg.
Exactly, and then it goes halfway up and it's on the knee and then sticking up. And certainly a person who's very adept at it can do it with their arms over their head. They've learned how to use it. So the left side does not have it, but the left side is additional dialogue. So it's if you were teaching to beginners, you'd probably tell them
the same.
So they got again to practice it. The left side is more like, well, you know what you're doing, so And I have to say that most people seem to have more success when they put their foot with their hands, then they stretch up. They do more correct. If you're very adept, you can keep them up. But I would certainly never teach, and I've seen no evidence here that you must keep your arms up. There's nothing at the end of the first set, keep your arms there.
Right, and it would be, because he has it in the dialogue in place, keep your arms there. Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I don't concern myself too much with the arms in that transition, but I do, if somebody's just keeping their body down and just swinging across without ever coming back up in a close way, then I might comment on that because they haven't really exited the right side before going into the left side. But, so I think you need to finish the right side before you start the left side. for me, I don't think that, you know, the specifics of the strong emphasis on very specifically bring your arms right up over your head and then turn the left. But I think the turning of the body is important.
Yes.
And so if you haven't if you haven't come up,
right,
you can't really turn properly. So the second side isn't executed in the same precision as the right side of the body. So you have to come up to be able to turn to go down.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Juan, you have anything on that one? Did he freeze? I feel like he froze.
It's like he might have frozen.
I think he slipped into meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually, once in a while when I take class, I think of that and I forget later. But that's interesting that Lenora brought that up because yeah, we don't teach that, but there was a time when we were doing that. It was
yes. And most of it looks very awkward. It's like, and they don't. The sounds are completely different. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. But it does. It will eliminate. You're right. You have to turn. Even in one of the CDs you guys listen to, that Bikram will actually say the word twist, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you have to look as well, just we're talking about it, the word order, that you've got arms over the head, grab your right foot 2 inches on the toes, 10 look, pull the toes, hard, flex your foot. Then this is all done just like rabbit posture. So what you then see people get in their own way, they're all contracted and then they're beginners and then they just can't grab the foot. Grab the foot, pull the toes, tuck your chin.
Yes. I agree. That's another one I witnessed my class back where it's funny you say that, Sarah. That was the one posture that I felt like everybody was on automatic pilot, had grabbed their foot and put their head down all at the same time, and their spines were flat.
Yes. Yeah.
There was no moment to grab, pull on your heels as hard as possible. Then tuck your chin, look at your stomach, right, to round in more.
And some people believe they can't grab their foot because they're doing that. They can't get it. But they went forward and stretched and looked and grabbed the foot and then did. Not only would they get all the right results, the benefits, they would be able to do it. They'd surprise themselves. You know?
And I think that, you know, the pulling on the toes, it's a bit like Paschimotto asana. I mean, the preparations are basically the same. But the next action is different. You know, for me, I didn't feel this when I was a beginner, but I do feel it every single time I practice now, that when I pull on my toes, I'm creating a 360 tension from my toes through my arms, through my shoulder, down my spine, into my abdomen and into my pelvis and into my hips and all the way down through my legs, down all the way to my ankles and my toes. So there's tension in the tensioning. It's like there's a moment where everything's getting put in its right place. So now everything's ready to do the next step. And so if I skip that, or if I had an injury or something that disrupted that process, I would end up in the posture thinking, I'm not in the right place. I mean, my body's not in the right place and nothing feels quite right. So that, you know, it's a seemingly small instruction to pull on the toes, but it is actually quite an important step to set up that tension through the body.
I totally feel you.
You know, and to your question earlier, Jeff, about the other postures, that, you know, so a lot of people don't have good mind-body connection to the middle of their body, to the upper thighs, into the hip muscles, into the lower abdominal muscles. They're like really not very well connected into that part of their body. And the only way they get, you know, they get that connection is through the repetition of this practice and just trying to do this the right way. And bit by bit, it's almost like, you know, rubbing away at a stone. You know, gradually it thaws, and then they have these little aha moments, and, you know, gradually it opens up, and then hopefully eventually there's floodgates and it opens up a lot more. And it does happen, but in the beginning, it's a very, very slow process.
Did I mishear, or did she also have a question about sit-up with Paschimottanasana?
Well, it's buried in there, the sit-up, but I think it was more related to what position are the arms in. You know, obviously when you sit up, your arms are coming up over your head, so they're already up.
So there is an order thing. So Lenora, it's only mentioned the arms in the sit-up for the Paschimottanasana in the second set. And it's this word order, I'll read it. Bring both legs out in front of you. Quickly lay on your back. Bring your arms over your head. So what you might be hearing is a difference between some people want you to bring your arms over your head before you go back, but that's the order what's written in there. Lie on your back, bring your arms over your head. And it's only in the second slide that the instruction is given. So it's not, it's after you've gone on the floor that you bring your arms over your head and sit up.
Yeah.
Much like when you're doing your regular sit-up.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a requirement to have your arms up to go down, if that makes sense. Sometimes you get it that order, and then I always did it because that's what I was taught for years, and then I realized that wasn't actually how it is.
Yeah, he's asking you to do a sit-up.
He's asking you to basically do a sit-up, lie on your back, bring your arms over your head, sit up. It's like exactly. Yes.
I mean, I think to me this topic and your question, Jeff, is fantastic, because to me this entire area is absolutely fascinating. That we hold our belief in our minds that there's some fundamental reality obstacle to us doing these things, like my legs are too long or too short, or my muscles don't work, or my tendons are too long or too short, or my ligaments are blah blah. We all have these stories and these beliefs that we can't do this, and to me it becomes increasingly clear over time that not a shred of that is true unless somebody's had a truly awful trauma to the body, like a things sliced apart kind of trauma, that we absolutely can. And what's missing is simply a connection between the brain and the specific individual pieces of the body, and that this is a process of awakening the connection between them. And we're very gifted at our studio that we had a gentleman who'd lost parts of his brain and lost motor control and was in a wheelchair that would practice in the corner, and we got to watch him day by day rebuilding neural connections to parts of his body where he had an actual mechanical failure in his connection between his brain and his body due to a bullet. So it's I think we have to just keep encouraging students to do this the right way without wavering or ambiguity, because that unwavering conviction is what's going to help them get through the struggle and have their own personal experiences of this, rather than it being some theory they read in a book or heard some teacher talk about.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about Bikram yoga, and I totally agree and concur. And it's funny because when you look at Nolan, he's probably the least attached to his story, and he has every right to be attached to his story, right? And then while everybody else is too attached to their story, and why, right? So that's why as we teach, right, we have to be, when you say the word unwavering, and that's such a great word, like we have to, the more that we do that, then the more that they're going to be less attached to their story.
Yes.
But, we have to give time and space for that, right? But we have to be careful not to buy into anybody's stuff, and yet at the same time have compassion. But if we buy into it, then they're going to stay invested in that story.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, you're right. Nolan is an amazing, I bumped into him not long ago. He's got a new wheelchair, and the wheelchair allows him to move his legs.
Oh, good.
Wonderful.
Right? And he looks like he could stand up any moment, like he's that loose with his body, and he's doing the yoga online, along with other stuff too. So, but yeah, think about that mental capability and what it's given him, right? As a result of not being stuck on his story. I remember when I first met him, I talked to him many, many times, and I asked him his story, and then he kept talking to me, and at the end he said, you know what, he gave me a card, and he said, if you want to know my story, go to my website. Okay, I went home that night and watched the video. I cried. I don't, you guys should go to his website, and you can read his story. I think most of you know, but that wasn't what he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, wasn't important.
No.
Not anymore,
Yes.
What, exactly.
So I think the analogy is better, like the analogy of a baby. A baby has the body structure and the mechanical pieces of the body. And maybe some of the muscles are weak, but it has all of the moving parts needed to walk. But a baby can't walk. And at some point, the baby starts to struggle to walk and makes a total pig's ear of it. What a mess. And falls over again and again and again and again and again. But the baby doesn't give up, because somewhere deep down there's some sense that walking's possible. And so the baby keeps trying and sees a lot of human adults going around walking, so thinks, oh, that looks cool, let me try that. And eventually They figure out how to do it. And I think that's the same thing that we're doing. It's just that because we're adults, we imagine we already did all that, but we didn't. We only learnt to use a small percentage of our body to enough of a degree to pass for functional adults. And then we kind of draw a line on it and say, okay, well, I've done that. I don't really want to do that anymore. And then at some point later, we think, well, okay, this may be a bit more.
We became adept at different techniques, each of us. So some people find it very, very easy to do standing relaxed stretching pose.
Yeah.
Very difficult to do standing straight head to knee. I'm one of those. I could describe myself as a beginner. Very easy to do standing up stretching, nothing to it. Standing straight head to knee, I didn't have the slightest idea how to do. So it's you look at one person and say, well, there's a problem or a deficit. It's just how they developed what they don't know how to use and what they know how to use in many cases. So this is summed up in a way by Bikram. What Bikram says, having doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to use it.
Right.
If you don't know how to use it, it's not going to come.
Right.
Until you do, and also to think that to go back to what I said earlier, that the end of the posture, the result, is not the main event. The technique to get there, however long it takes, is the main event.
Yeah.
And what brings you the benefits.
God, it takes so long to really embed that in your being.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I said this to a class the other day, like, what are we basically doing in a yoga class? We're basically doing some physical things which aren't terribly difficult, but require a certain amount of attention and a certain amount of intensity and effort. And we do them for 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds. And during that process, a bunch of stuff comes up, physical sensations, mental sensations, thoughts, which we have to deal with. And the real yoga is simply, what are we learning in the process of doing all that? What are we learning physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Because what we're learning is the real yoga. The other stuff is just the tool we're using to get there. So we can kind of laugh when it's difficult or it seems impossible, because that's good, because
it is
shining a light on something.
Yeah, we got to be patient enough and on the podium, right? Be deliberate enough to give them the time to get what your point is, Matt. Right? Yeah.
We fortunately have run out of time again.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like we always run out of time, but 90 minutes is a good duration to have.
Yeah, very good one again. Very good one. Yeah.
So thank you. Everybody, I know there are a few people in the background listening. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Lenora and Mary, thank you for submitting questions online.
Yes.
To everybody here, this is recorded, so we will post this. And come next time. We do these once a quarter. And Rajashree is almost always with us, which is fabulous. So we're very privileged.
It is, yeah.
So thank you.
And thank you, Juan, for joining us too. Bye. Thank you, guys. Really nice to see everybody. Bye, Claire.
Bye, Claire.
Yeah, we got Claire renovated.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Bye then.